All right, Mr. Locklear.
We're tag teaming tonight. All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Our second case tonight involves a land use amendment, map amendment. They're requesting an amendment from low density residential to medium density residential. The owner of record is Wingo Holdings and applicant is Serafano, and it involves 89.12 acres in the Black River Township. The physical characteristics of the site: the property is vacant, currently vacant and undeveloped land. Surrounding land uses consist of single-family residences, a primary school, and several undeveloped parcels. Approximately 5 acres of the property is already classified as medium-density residential. Per the application, design would be similar in nature to the adjacent residential development, Weatherspoon, which I think has 15,000 square foot lots currently or proposed. Well, no, they're on the ground. And there would be 2 planned connections to the Weatherspoon development. And we went over that in your work session, that there was 2, including the access out on the school road as well. Public water is utilized as well as public sewer. The annual daily traffic count on NC 210 is 7,800 cars. North Harnett Primary School has 90 cars per day, 9 buses, and that's 2 times a day. The requested land use classification change to medium density residential will not have a negative impact on the surrounding properties due to the residential nature of the area. The requested land use classification is compatible with the surrounding land use, as the classification is the same classification for the adjacent properties. And the requested medium density residential classification would enhance or maintain the public's health and safety and general welfare due to the direct access to public water and sewer to the site. On May 2nd, the Harnett County Planning Board voted unanimously 5-0 to recommend approval of this land use map amendment based on the zoning compatibility in the existing medium density residential on the adjacent property. There were several residents in attendance that night, living in close proximity to the subject property, and spoke in opposition to the land use map amendment, stating concerns the potential sedimentation pollution in the creek and nearby ponds, increased traffic on North Harnett School Road, NC 210, and the adverse effects to the wildlife population, and the available capacities of the schools in the district were also mentioned. As explained in the evaluation, the requested land use map is compatible with the Harnett County regulatory documents and would not have an unreasonable impact on the surrounding community due to the existing medium density residential designated areas adjacent to the property, as well as the direct access to public water and public sewer. Therefore, it's recommended that a reclassification request be approved. And this is obviously a much different request than what we're used to as a board. I want to take a few minutes and maybe go through some of the differences between this and maybe a rezoning, something that the board and even the guests tonight would be used to. First of all, the land use map or the land use plan is a policy document. It helps us guide growth, and it's not a regulatory document like the UDO. So our request tonight, but how it comes into play for this particular project, is that it's part of a compatibility or conservation subdivision. That is where we look at the underlying zoning district, and then we also go look at our land use plan to determine whether a certain density can be acquired. There's other things that's involved in that. The developer can choose to do sidewalks, street trees, concrete curb and gutter, and a host of other amenities in order to receive a density bonus. And it is my understanding that that is what the folks are doing or making this request for in order to change this amendment, in order to receive a density bonus to allow them to have additional lots for their proposed development. Further, I would like to point out that there is a small creek that separates this project from the Neals Creek Farms development that separates, which is a natural boundary. Obviously, when we created the land use plan, we just made an arbitrary line that went across and didn't include that natural boundary line as the creek, which would have probably made more sense to use that as a natural boundary and take it all the way to the creek for that. But I would remind you that a big part of a conservation development that would be proposed for this site would be lots of open space. Open space, as Jay just mentioned in the previous text amendment, and what we usually ask for all the time in this county is we like to see a lot of open space. We like to conserve our natural areas as much as possible. Along that creek would be, because it's in the water supply watershed, it would also require a 100-foot buffer that would have to stay off that. So while we understand this goes to the creek, we understand that there would be no lots developed to the creek itself, as we would be a 100-foot buffer to setback, and that those areas would require, especially if they're wetlands, that they have to go into some type of open space category. You'll see that on projects that are similar to this, where you have a lot of environmental features in place, and so you'll see those areas remain in open space and helping preserve those highly environmentally sensitive areas for the county. So keep that in mind. Next, I would remind the board that runoff erosion control issues are handled by the state of North Carolina for us. We have to look towards them to help us in those, and they handle the program for the state, which handles it for our county. So when we have issues, such as Mr. Collins' issues that he mentioned at the last meeting that he was here and we spoke about, we have to work with North Carolina Division of Environmental and Natural Resource. A lot of folks know it as DENR, to help us get through those problems. And so we are working with them actively, I think, on Mr. Collins' issues that he mentioned, and if there are any that arrive on any future projects or any projects for Harnett County, we have to lean on them for that. I would also remind the board that NCDOT would review all traffic impacts and require all necessary improvements for the county. As a lot of folks don't realize that we have to lean on DOT to handle our roads. We make all the requests we want, but at the end of the day, it's in their corner on how they handle our roads for the county. Every time that a new development is proposed, we have to look at them for the driveway permit and all the necessary required improvements. So whatever takes place, it's their job to look at that and require the developer or the project owner or the landowner to make those improvements. So, and then last, I know that the board, as well as our office, has received a couple of calls about the idea of proposed multifamily for this particular project. That has not been the case. We have not received any proposals for multifamily for this specific project. Matter of fact, if we did, it would be required, because of the underlying zoning district of RA30, it would be required to apply for a special use permit. So, and we would go to the Board of Adjustment for that. And everybody would be notified, all the adjacent property owners, and we would go through a quasi-judicial process to handle that. So I'm sure I didn't cover everybody's issues. I tried to touch on some of the ones that we received at the last meeting, some of the phone calls that we've had, and some of the discussions that we've had with board members. I'm available for any questions, and I'll handle any questions that you have tonight. Thank you.
I have a question. How much medium density space is around this tract of land?
Oh, existing already?
Yeah.
It's 5 to 6 acres that's already zoned. It's a small sliver at the bottom of the property that's already zoned medium density residential. And below it, it would be the entire south side of it. I don't have that. The Atherstone project, if we pull back to the map, you can see, there you go, below. You can see this sits right on the bottom. So anything to the south of this project is all zoned medium density residential.
Okay, so what is it?
Atherstone. It's hard to say.
Yeah.
It is. It's a different
That's
name.
all medium density. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And it's in place, and most of it's been, it's been laid out.
And if we, regardless of how this change in the land use plan plays out tonight, we're not changing the zoning. The zoning will remain RA30.
That's absolutely correct.
Which will allow the owner of this property to build houses on this land.
That is correct.
Okay.
The question tonight, the overall arching theme for everybody in the room is what I explained. that if you change this to medium density residential, then it's going to allow the developer to get an additional amount of lots. We haven't received the official proposal, so I can't tell you if it'll be 10, 15. The developer is here tonight. He may be able to answer that question for you. But that's the thing to understand. The biggest thing to understand, too, is it's going to be a subdivision. Most likely it's going to be a subdivision. It can be a subdivision. Let me say it that way. I don't know if they want to pay for it or not, but I'm speaking for them, but it's been proposed to be a subdivision.
Any other questions for Mr. Locklear?
I have questions.
Yes, ma'am.
I am concerned about the fact that you're saying that changing it will allow the developers to get more houses on these lots. That's a concern for me. I was born and raised here in Harnett County. I've been here all my life. And I'm seeing some things now with the growth that we have in the house and building all these houses on different lots. I'm very concerned about stacking more houses on this particular land and for this lot. And I'm also concerned about the traffic because I'm very much aware that the traffic in that area is already pretty heavy. So these are my concerns, and I think that's we as representatives of the citizens of this county, we have an obligation to look into. We can't stop these developers. That's not what we there's nothing we can do, but we can monitor what they're doing and how they're building these houses, because these citizens that buy these houses, they're going to be there for a lifetime. And then it's still, and with that, it's going to be passed on to their children or whoever. And that is my biggest concern. I know you're making it sound good and all of that, but it ain't good enough for me.
I understand, Ms. McCoy, and I would tell you that those are absolutely valid concerns, and that is certainly that every member of this board tonight should take into consideration. I'm not sitting up here telling you that it's going to sound good.
I understand.
I'm telling you what the technical side of it is. You have to look at take into consideration what's proposed and all the things that you mentioned, and then make the best decision that you can.
I mean, that area, I'm fully aware of that area, the Harnett Central area. It's already stacked with homes, and I'm not saying that the developers don't have a right to continue to build there. But let's just build it in the right way. And my way may not be the right way for the rest of the board and the rest of the citizens in here. But that's just my way.
Well, I can tell you, regardless of the decision that you make tonight, we're going to make sure they build it the right way if we can.
All right.
That's our job.
I have another question. This annual daily traffic count, 7,800 vehicles. I'd almost say the 7,800 in the morning.
Right.
Maybe not. When was that done?
Once again, we depend on DOT for a lot of our numbers, and so I'm not sure. Do you know
It's at least a year old, maybe 2 years old.
Yeah, it could be a year to 2 years old. You always have to look at the traffic count numbers with a little bit of sway in them because they don't go out and look at the roads as much as we wish they would.
I have another comment, too.
Yes, ma'am.
When you tell me it depends on DOT,
I know.
I know how DOT moves.
Yes, ma'am, I'm aware.
So that doesn't give me much hope there. You said DOT, depends on DOT. You waiting on DOT, might be a lifetime.
You're right.
You're right. You're right.
I have a question. How long has the applicant owned the property?
I'm not sure about that. He'll be up in a minute. That might be a better question for the applicant.
Any other questions for Mr. Locklear? Hearing none, I will open up the public hearing, and anyone that wishes to speak for or against this land use change, please come forward. State your name and your address, please.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Jamie Guerrero. I'll spell it because it's an odd last name. It's Guerrero. I know the planning board asked me to spell it when I was there. I'm with Morris and Ritchie Associates. We are the design engineering firm. My address is 5605 Chapel Hill Road in Raleigh, 27607. I am here representing Wingo Holdings. I'll just begin. Wingo Holdings at the planning board has brought up and said they were just incorporated 5 or 6 months ago. That is not unusual. The Wingo Holdings is part of a subsidiary of a development and construction group called Quality One. Every time they do a new development, they form a new LLC. It's very common. The reason being is it protects each development is a separate entity of itself, and each development also has different funding sources, and so you form a new LLC. Very, very common. At the planning board meeting, I was able to obtain a lot of information from the neighbors and their concerns, and I think Commissioner McCoy, you had very similar concerns there about what we're trying to do. Even though the designation that we're trying to go is from low density residential, which I think defines it as 1 to 3 units per acre, we're trying to go to medium density residential, which is 2 to 5 units per acre. In this particular situation, that is not the case. We're still going to be well under 2 units per acre. So we're still, even our final concept plans, we've done a number. Our total number of units are still going to be within that low density residential range. What we're trying to accomplish is to allow us to do some design standards are a little bit of higher design standards for this subdivision. One of the biggest things is there is a primary school adjoining or adjacent to this site. If you look currently, there is no safe pedestrian walkway or travel way for children who go to this school or parents to go to the school to be able to walk to that school. Right now, they would have to walk up NC Highway 210, absolutely no sidewalks on Highway 210. And you got a very large subdivision just adjoining to the south of that called Atherstone. I think it was brought up tonight, who's putting in a number of single-family residential homes. Well, they have connectivity points that are stub-out streets to this parcel, and they're putting in sidewalks on that parcel, but those sidewalks are going to essentially dead end, still providing no pedestrian connectivity to that school. What our developer is proposing in order to go in with a higher design standard guideline in order to create sidewalks and curb and gutter and safe streets is we have to go through this process and go from a low density residential designation, which it would allow, again, that does allow for regular subdivisions with NCDOT open ditch section roads. It doesn't necessarily require for sidewalks. You just have open ditch section, regular standard state roads. We want to enhance that and take it so we do have that pedestrian connectivity to that school and to the subdivision to the south. One of the biggest concerns are the environmental natural resources that are currently out there. A lot of the neighbors really enjoy, especially to the north side of our subdivision. The proposed property is bounded to the north by a stream. That's why if you look at the property line, it's real jagged. And generally speaking, that's because there's a natural feature that is defining that property. And it is. That's Neal's Creek. What we are proposing in order to do sidewalks and curb and gutter on these roads, what that kicks in, and it really doesn't go in the ordinance because it goes into the state rules, it kicks in a higher level of stormwater quality. So the state will look at this development not as a low density development. Because we have sidewalks and curb and gutter, we're automatically kicked into a high density criteria, meaning we have to treat stormwater. The developer was going to have to put stormwater measures in to mitigate for the extra stormwater runoff that would be coming from the roads and the houses. We can't dump that stormwater directly into the creek. We have to treat it, and we treat it through a process. More than likely, there's a bunch of tools in the toolbox, but most likely it's going to be captured in a pond, a stormwater pond feature. Not only does that contain what we call the peak flow, the peak runoff flow, it also provides a benefit because it treats that stormwater. It takes out the total suspended solids. It also takes out nutrients, nitrogen and phosphorus for one, which are the main concerns of the streams and the estuaries. So that's what going from LDR to MDR will allow us to do. It gives us a better, more high quality development. I know there's concerns that were brought to my attention during and after the meeting 2 weeks ago, the planning board meeting, about what kind of product are we proposing. We are not proposing multifamily. That includes apartments, that includes townhomes, and that includes duplexes. We are expressly going in with single-family residential home sites. The home sites are going to be of high quality. A lot of issues you got in neighboring counties. You see these subdivisions going in, and they're packing in 4 to 5 dwelling units per acre, and just packing them in when people do not have yards. They have 10 feet in between the structures. This is not the case. We're going to have wide front yards. We're going to have wide backyards. We're limited to either 12,000 or 15,000 square feet, depending on how much open space we want to provide. That's another concern, open space. This developer wants to maintain high quality open space and leave as much undisturbed property as possible, which I believe the ordinance is around 25% or something like that. In this case, we're going to be well above the 30% in preserving open space. So that is why we want to go from this LDR to the MDR. If we go with low density residential, what that essentially does is it spreads these lots out further. You get bigger lots, but they're spread out, meaning more roadway, meaning additional stormwater runoff. But the state says because you got larger runoff, even though you have more runway, they still treat that as a low density residential and allows you to just use ditches to convey your stormwater. And you can discharge that stormwater into the stream without any sort of treatment. In this case, that's poor engineering practices on my part to allow that to happen. What we do not want to do is contribute to any of the ongoing issues the neighbors have explained to me about Neals Creek with the erosion going on in the creek. We don't want to contribute to that. There is also we're not asking for a rezoning, and because that is a stream, we have to stay a minimum of 30 feet away from that stream anyway, a natural buffer. Our concept sketches show a greater than 30 feet natural buffer that we've gone so far. Traffic concerns, everyone's concerned about traffic. I work in Raleigh. Let me tell you something. You haven't seen traffic until you go to Raleigh every morning and try to get back home every evening. That's traffic. Everyone is concerned about traffic. It's been brought up that NCDOT is the one that determines what is done and what isn't done. Let me tell you how NCDOT works. Generally speaking, in a subdivision like this, they will require what's called a traffic impact analysis. What that is the developer will hire an engineering firm, not mine. It'll be a third-party engineer that specializes in traffic analysis. And they'll go out and actually count cars and count how many cars are on 210, how many cars are turning into the school, North Harnett Road, and determine what is called an existing level of service. What does that mean? Well, everyone who's been on an overcrowded road or has been on a road trying to make a right or left-hand turn and they don't have any stacking distance, so that it stops traffic on that road because you got too many cars trying to make that turn, that is determined a poor level of service. It's rated kind of like grade school where you got A through F grades for a level of service. Well, what that traffic impact analysis will do is it will assign a existing level of service as if nothing has changed today and our development hasn't gone in. And then it looks at our development and as well as planned developments or developments that may occur in the future and assigns another level of service. If that level of service is less than what the existing level of service is, we have to mitigate for that. And the developer is responsible for putting in those mitigation means. What do I mean by that? I mean, the developer may have to add a left-hand turn lane on NC 210. They may have to widen and make improvements on North Harnett Road, making it safer for the general public. If we didn't have this development, Commissioner McCoy, you're absolutely right. DOT is not going to put those efforts in. They're just not. But what they do is they require the developer to put those measures in and make those improvements to traffic. So that's another advantage of our proposed subdivision. So and as far as transparency, I was at the planning board meeting. I met several of the concerned neighbors, and I will not be able to satisfy their concerns completely. But I have agreed, and we have agreed to meet with their homeowners association on May 19th to discuss our project in detail and also to give listen to their concerns in detail. That's what we try to do. That's what Mr. Serafano tries to do. It's very important for him to have a dialogue and try to come to consensus because there's potential ways in our design, in our layout, that we can mitigate some of their concerns. We're very well aware of it. Before our meeting, the HOA meeting on Neals Creek, I'm going to go out there early and actually walk Neals Creek. They got a nice path, I understand, that runs behind the subdivision parallel Neals Creek. I want to walk that. I want to be able to make sure that whatever our developer, whatever we do on our side, that we can kind of maintain that tranquility on their side of the stream. That's very important. So that's why we're here tonight. It's not necessarily about achieving more units. Yes, we do get more units, but it's a more compact design. We achieve those units by decreasing the actual road. Instead of having lots laid out all along a long road, we're having a more compact design. Other environmental concerns where there are some small tributaries and there are wetlands on that site. We have had a wetland scientist go out and our design has to take those areas into consideration. So what we do for that is we minimize, first we try to avoid any impacts. But sometimes you just got to cross a stream because there's no other way to access your property, so you got to put in a culvert. If there's an existing culvert there, great. We're not really doing anything except maybe upgrading it and making it more safe for our road. But if we add any additional impacts, we have to go through a process called the 401 and 404 permitting process. 401 is a permit that's issued by NC Diener, Division of Water Resources, and the 404 is a permit that is issued by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. What that requires is to any impacts, we have to limit our wetland and stream impacts. That's the overall development. We have to limit it to a certain criteria. Right now, I think it's less than 1/10 of an acre of wetland impacts. If you exceed that, you have to provide mitigation. So we're trying to avoid any wetland impacts and then minimize any impacts that we have. Same with the streams. And that has to be permitted by the state. We can't go out there and fill a stream or fill a low area that's a wetland, just one day just go out and build a road and fill it. We have to have it permitted. Now, the other issue that was brought to our attention is erosion and sediment control. That is my passion. Prior to becoming working on the private side, I was the Johnson County Development Engineer, and I was able to bring in or to start the county sediment and erosion control program because the state wasn't doing their job. I mean, just effectively. It's not the people that are in the state not wanting to do their job. They're just completely overwhelmed with being able to go out to all the sites that are in construction and to monitor for erosion sediment control. What we do as engineers is we design an erosion and sediment control plan. It has to get approved by the state, and that plan has certain conditions. One of those conditions, amongst a lot of them, is you cannot have off-site erosion or sedimentation leaving your site and going into another site, or more importantly, leaving your site and going into a water body. If that happens, and I'm not going to sit there and pretend it doesn't, we have a major storm event come through, it can wipe out these measures, and that is a violation of our erosion control permit, and it requires the developer to clean up that sediment the best they can. If they don't clean it up and don't satisfy the permit conditions within a reasonable period of time, the developer is subject to some very, very hefty fines. So that is as well as an important process in this development, in our request. I'm welcome to entertain any questions the commissioners may have.
I would like to ask the board, let's finish up with the public hearing, and then we'll, if we have questions for the developer, we can ask them at that time, if the board's in agreement with that. Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to speak?
My name is Allan Bunton. I live at 61 Karen Court in Anger. Just two quick factual corrections. The jagged property line is not Neal's Creek. It's a stream called Soldier's Branch, sometimes referred to as Soldier's Creek. It runs into Neal's Creek. Secondly, this company was not formed 5 or 6 months ago. It was registered with the Secretary of State less than 12 weeks ago, for what that's worth. We hear the line that it's going to be developed one way or another. Maybe, maybe not. But that's not the point. The question is, how will it be developed? Currently, it's RA 40 LDR to the north. It's RA 30 MDR to the south. What's in between? RA 30 like the south and LDR like the north. The Unified Development Ordinance requires the Planning Department to follow the county's comprehensive growth plan and the Northwest Area Plan, plans that were adopted just 7 and 4 years ago, after careful deliberation by hundreds of stakeholders. The 2018 Northwest Area Plan describes its purpose as to serve as a framework for accommodating growth and development while maintaining rural character, environmental quality, and the livability of the area. The plan, quote, provides a roadmap for how to manage, close quote, the development, pressure, and growth from the north. Quote, specifically the rapid growth of Wake County and Fuquay-Varina, including protecting the characteristics and qualities that the community values. As you know, those plans and the associated land use maps in particular are not discretionary. The land use map established RA 30 LDR in these parcels as a transition zone most compatible with the land use classifications for the properties to both the north and the south. As Mr. Locklear said at last week's work session, sometimes when we create these boundaries, we always like to use a natural boundary or a property line. And clearly, for good reason, if you look at the map, property lines are what were used here when the land use map was adopted. The planning department says that the change is reasonable because the benefits of the change outweigh any potential harm. What are the benefits of the change to the residents of Harnett County? No benefits are identified. The department says that the change will not have a negative impact because the surrounding properties are residential in nature. But that's not the standard. The question is whether there's negative impact in changing from lower density to higher density. Clearly, there's negative impact. The planning department also says that the reclassification would enhance or maintain the public health, safety, and general welfare because there is direct access to public water and sewer. That direct access, however, exists whether the designation is MDR or LDR. And obviously, the change would not enhance or maintain the public health, safety, and general welfare. To the contrary, the change would increase the demands on public water and sewer. I can't say it any better than what Commissioner McCoy said last week. She said, we can't stop growth, and growth is not always bad, but we've got to manage the growth, because if we don't manage the growth, who suffers? The citizens in this county suffer. The planning department talks about preferring conservation-style subdivisions, but those can exist in either MDR or LDR. Moreover, if a change is made and Wingo is unable to go forward or decides not to, the change would remain. As for the planning board, no objective listener attending the May 2nd meeting could have decided as they did. After hearing from the developer's engineer, not a single person during the public comment period spoke in favor of the proposed change. A parade of people spoke in opposition with facts and careful analysis. The planning board offered no explanation for its decision, not the way to build public confidence in the process. What people said following that meeting are things like, so much for representative government. They smile and nod, but it was already a done deal. It's just a rubber stamp. Follow the money. There's a difference between cooperating with a landowner developer to make it work within the rules and making it work for a developer by changing the rules, particularly an out-of-county land speculator who formed a development company less than 12 weeks ago.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Reverend Chris Turner. I reside at 107 North Harnett School Road in Anger. I thank you for a few minutes of your time tonight to address the board. If you will look on the land map and see right in the middle of this 89 acres is a 3-acre out parcel right in the very center. That's where I live. My wife and I reside and have for the past 7 years. We have a permanent easement to the driveway that comes out to North Harnett School Road. It's 3/4 of a mile long. We purchased this property again 7 years ago because for us it was a dream location. Beautiful home up on a hill, secluded back in the pines. I raise and train hunting dogs. I have 50 American foxhounds, and we raise and train and breed those, and also black Labrador retrievers. It was an ideal location for us to not only have our home, but also the kennels, where the noise and odor and things associated with the dogs would not encroach upon any other close neighbors. We've loved that rural setting. I've been pastor at Neels Creek Baptist Church for over 11 years now. What you've heard tonight is really a discussion between low-density residential, medium-density residential. Some would have you believe that it's a matter of 10 to 15 homes or lots one way or the other. I would submit to you that it really is a matter of whether or not we are giving these folks a green light to proceed and to go on and do whatever they want to do. If you do not approve the change to medium-density residential, is it already a given deal that they will develop this property? Maybe they will, maybe they won't. Obviously, as someone who lives right in the middle of the track, obviously these folks that are here from Neels Creek Farms to the north, they are here because they would prefer that this not be developed. It's going to drastically alter our quality of life. Mr. Guerrero would have you believe that he knows all of this and studied this land in detail. Again, I would echo what Mr. Bunton said, that he was not even able to accurately identify the creeks there. On the north side is Soldier's Creek. It empties into Neels Creek on the backside. There's some significant features about this 89 acres. One is the topography. It has tremendous hills and drop-offs that go down to these creeks, feed into these creeks. There are significant tributaries and wetlands on the property. We have seen, as more and more land has been cleared adjacent to it, such as the Atherstone subdivision, increased water runoff. During Hurricane Matthew and Florence, we had significant erosion to our driveway easement, to the fact that it completely washed it out. And I had to have Ricky Temple come and put in a new tile and riprap in the amount of $15,000 just for us to be able to use our driveway. When there are storms, the water feeds into these creeks and it rushes extremely quickly. And you need to understand that when these drastic changes to the landscape occur, where from the natural landscape like it is to land that is suitable then for development, they're going to come in there with heavy equipment. They're going to flatten a lot of it. They're going to change how the water runs and feeds not only into Soldier's Creek, but into Neels Creek. It's just ludicrous to think that it will not have impacts on that. There are other things on the property, such as the Massey family cemetery that Mr. Guerrero did not tell you about. There are other things on the property, such as the historic site of the original location of Neels Creek Baptist Church when it was founded in 1780. The foundation of that church is there on that property. It should be preserved. The Massey family deserves that their family cemetery be preserved and it not be just bulldozed and moved out of the way for houses to be developed. The last thing that I want to really speak to is the traffic concern that Ms. McCoy has already brought up. I would remind you that Atherstone subdivision is set to have some 300 homes in it. Going up Harnett Central Road, there's going to be 2 major developments that have already been started. There's already clearing and grading work taking place there. If you go up 210 past where the Harnett Central Road intersection is, another huge development there called the Farms at Neels Creek. All of these developments, along with Atherstone, have started. They've already been approved. They put in streets. In some cases, they've stubbed plumbing, but there's not a single house on any of these yet. We don't know the impacts of those thousands of homes that are coming. Imagine if every one of those homes has 2 vehicles, the congestion it's going to bring to the Harnett Central Road, Highway 210 corridor. That road is so busy. Every day that I pull out, I have a very short commute, thankfully, but every day I have to wait and count cars and many times just pull out and hope for the best as I pull on 210 to go to work. Mr. Guerrero noted the traffic in Raleigh. We don't want that here. The taxpayers of Harnett County deserve better. Think of the school congestion that we already have with the middle school, the high school, and then North Harnett Elementary School. Think of young drivers who've just gotten their driver's license, going to school through all of this traffic. They are suggesting to you that they would tie into the back part of the property, the back half of the property, by coming in through Atherstone. And if you've seen a site plan for Atherstone, it's kind of like a web of roads. It's neighborhood streets. It's not a straight shot in. They're talking about winding all the way through there and accessing the back of the property there instead of going in through North Harnett School Road. Think of the site plan, and I've not seen it, but I've heard the number in excess of 100 homes, maybe 130, give or take. Now think of someone having a fire, a medical emergency, a 911 situation, where fire rescue has got to come from Andrew Black River, or they've got to come from Lillington because it's almost right on the Andrew-Lillington line there. They've got to come up 210 either way. They then got to hope that the school traffic from North Harnett School is not backed up into 210 as it is every day. You've heard no less than 90 cars. Every day a sheriff's deputy has to be there. It's not a good design for a school in the first place to have one way in and one way out. That's dangerous, but that's what you've got to work with there and what those parents have to put up with every single day that school is in session. Imagine those emergency vehicles have to come up 210. They have to turn into these entrances, weave their way through what will be Atherstone subdivision, and then get to the very back of a proposed development that Wingo Holdings and Morris and Ritchie is suggesting. The response time would be atrocious. I think there will be real consequences. 300 homes in Atherstone. That'll be 600 vehicles. Are we then going to pack another 100, 200 vehicles on top of that? Ladies and gentlemen, that'll be almost 800 vehicles that would be dumping in to Highway 210 on a daily basis. If you look at the site plan for the two entrances of Atherstone, they're both just around a curve. One of them is going right around the water tower there on 210. You come around that curve if you're heading toward Lillington, boom, there's an entrance. Somebody's going to pull out of that subdivision and get T-boned and get killed. I guarantee it. Coming from the other way, from the south way, the same thing. When you come from the Harnett Central 210 intersection, you come around a curve that way and a dip in the road, and you're on the next entrance. They have very short turn lanes there for people to be able to turn in. But what have they done to remedy the situation for people turning out? We can talk about DOT all day, but if we give a green light to this, we're setting this situation up. Why not wait and see what the effects are going to be of these developments that are already going in? Once houses are there, once people are living there, why not see what the effects are going to be before we just green light, green light, green light? Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate your hearing. I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have. We love this land, we care for it, and we just want to see the best done for this community and for the taxpayers and residents who have lived there for a long time. I know anytime you've got development, you're going to have this clash with people who have lived there. Mr. Guerrero, Mr. Serafano, they've not come to see me, and I live right in the middle of it. Thank you so much.
Thanks, sir.
Can I speak?
Yes, sir.
Okay. My name is Michael Collins. I'm going to share some information, if I can, with Mr. Guerrero. I'm sure he's privy to this already, but he'll know what I'm talking about, and I'd also like to share it with you. So I'm going to give you the Atherstone, which they're going to connect into, and the points where they're going to connect are highlighted there. That'll show you a little bit about what was just discussed, that these are roads to a neighborhood. This is not really a connection to a road per se. But the other thing is environmental, and I'm sure that Mr. Guerrero would be familiar with this if he took a little bit more time. And that's that this particular lane is really the drainage basin for about 650 acres. The yellow line around there actually is the fall line to this property. And you'll see that 10 ponds.
Mr. Collins, sorry,
yes.
Pass one to the clerk as well.
Yes, that's 10 ponds drain either adjacent to this property or across this property. And of course, the issue of springs and groundwater is that as that water that is not surface water goes down into the ground, it drains to that point too. So that's why you're having a lot of springs, a lot of wetland issues in that area. And Mr. Guerrero, with his experience, he would know that if he became substantially more familiar with the property. But that lends itself not to higher density development, but actually a lower density development. And then, as Mr. Bunton said, and your land use planning people said, they talked about buffers, and how you would use a natural buffer like the creek for the zoning. I'd hoped he would say that you would use a property line to create a buffer between a very low density property and a higher density development area so that you'd have a transition between the two. Low density is appropriate in that scenario because you're creating a transition from very low density to medium density. That's very reasonable. It's even more reasonable in this case because of the complexities of the site. The shape is unusual. It's very long and narrow. And again, it is the drainage area for 650 acres approximately and 10 water features. And according to those blue lines, that water's running almost all the time. That's why there are those blue dotted lines there. So I would say to the board, this particular property is more so than any property nearby, less appropriate for a higher density upgrade. And while this developer may have great intentions, things can happen. His company can walk away. The next company comes in and says, hey, you upzone me for 185 houses. That's what I'm going to do. And they would have to meet some of those things with the state, but anybody who's dealt with them recently knows they're very much overworked. They have a lot of developments that they really can't get to on a regular basis. So things are happening on a lot of developments that, probably wouldn't happen in another time. And I would like to briefly address the traffic. It's mostly environmental, but I mentioned developments going in nearby. There's actually 2,256 houses in 9 developments immediately in that area. Of course, Atherstone is 367 by itself. If you said we have 2 cars a day going in and out of there, that's 9,400 trips during a day just from those developments, just in that little area. So traffic is going to be very intense. And I could say, well, maybe another 100 houses doesn't make that much difference. But every little bit that we pile on there is going to be create a more intense environment. So the combination of a poor area to upzone, not only because it removes what is a buffer of low density between ultra low density to medium density. If you go to medium density on this property, you no longer have that buffer in transition between types of properties, but also the fact that there are significant issues around drainage and around erosion control, and they're not going to be helped by higher density. I know Mr. Guerrero talked about curb and gutter. Curb and gutter accelerates flows of water. They can do a lot to try to mitigate that, and I know he'll work hard at that. But his issue is he's not dealing with 89 acres. He's dealing with 650 acres. That's really the water flows that he's going to have to try to deal with in that environment. And I'm not saying they can't do a good development, and I'm not saying that they can't do a good development at the low density that they're approved for now. I'm just saying that there's nothing about moving to a higher density that is going to improve that situation. And as Mr. Bunton clearly pointed out, there's nothing there that is mandatory once it's upzoned for this developer to do what he's talking about, low density, conservation, all of that. It doesn't really have to be done. I mean, he could do it, but it doesn't have to be done. And if something happens and that developer walks away, you have a real problem, because the next developer can come in and he can just simply try to maximize that density on property that's very ill-suited for that type of development. And I thank you for listening to me. I'm sorry, I'm Michael Collins, and I live at 5821 NC 210 North, which is right at the end of the school road that they're talking about. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Sadie Strictland, and I am a semi-recent graduate from Harnett Central High School. I have lived here in Harnett County, close, right on off 210, my entire life, and my schooling consisted of North Harnett Primary, Bowie's Creek Elementary, Harnett Central Middle School, and Harnett Central High School. During my time at the middle school, the entire back of the campus between the main building and the sports field was filled with trailers and one huge pod, which all held classrooms. This was the overflow area, since there were 30 to 35 kids per class with no extra room for desks. I can honestly say that I never interacted with the kids in the 7th grade pods because there was no mingling between those in the trailers and those in the main building except for electives. I can remember being able to pick out what we called the pod kids, since they were either sporting big winter jackets, wet shirts, or red sweaty faces, depending on the weather. That year, I was lucky enough to be assigned a class in the main building. Things quickly changed when I got to high school. Each year, different teachers were forced into the trailers outside. I do believe this was done to give some fairness throughout the faculty, but it was a guessing game for the students to see which teachers would end up where from year to year. I remember my freshman year, I was seeing the upper level carpentry classes building a huge storage building outside, and I honestly thought that it was going to serve as a classroom the next year. Luckily, I was very wrong, and it later sold as a fundraiser for the program. The class size grew as well when I entered Harnett Central High School. The maximum number of students allowed were placed into each room with desks crammed into every open inch. This was all pre-COVID. One semester, there was a student in my math class who had to sit at the teacher's desk for an entire week until a chair, not even a desk, was found to accommodate him. My biggest class housed 54 students. Talk about work for that poor teacher. And it was not a PE class, so we didn't have the huge gym. I graduated with well over 300 students, and I can remember the teachers saying the incoming grades were even larger. I'd hate to think about the interesting ways teachers made room for these larger classes after I left. There are many new developments going up in the Harnett Central School District, and they are not yet ready for people to move into. All of these future families in the new houses bring numerous students ranging from kindergarten through high school, and I don't think we're prepared for them. We have no plan to house, educate, or transport these new students whose homes are just now being built, much less those whose subdivision plans have yet to be drawn up. I ask you to please postpone this redistricting until we have a clearer picture of the effects these new subdivisions have on our children, not only for those who will move here in the future, but also for those already here as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chairman Weatherspoon, County Commissioners, My name is Gene Percival. I live at 315 Hartman Drive in Neels Creek Subdivision, District 4. That last comment's going to be hard to follow. I hadn't really thought about when we're talking about the cars and the environment and all the other negative things for this development is all the children that are planning to move in with their families in already overcrowded schools. I'll be brief. So my comments, I wanted you to meet me. I don't represent a out-of-town developer or corporation that's coming in to make a profit. I'm a soldier stationed at Fort Bragg, and I've lived here over 10 years. I am your average citizen that the county commissioners are protecting our interest. I pay taxes here. I own a tractor, and I send a tax payment every year. And the thing that concerns me is the rapid growth. So 10 years ago in Angier, if you remember, and I agree with Commissioner McCoy, is this rapid growth. If you look at how much Angier has changed in just the last year with developments on either side, 210 hasn't gotten any bigger. And there's only one Bojangles in Lillington. And if you come through here in the morning, that's just an example of how crowded it's getting, whether we're ready or not. I would echo some of the comments. What's the rush? So a fallacy of logic that was previously stated tonight is Weatherspoon subdivision has already been approved and it's medium density. So therefore, the adjoining lot to that, the adjoining 89 acres should also be medium density since we already have it. But I agree wholeheartedly is why not have some low density and some medium density, and why not wait and see what is the real impact to Weatherspoon and what is the real impact to all these other subdivisions that we have approved. I'm not anti-development, and I have no ill will against the developer. What I'm advocating for is responsible development. I don't think the time is right. And I've walked over some of that land that we're talking about in some of that surrounding area, and it's not conducive to a subdivision. You couldn't have picked a worse tract of land. There's plenty of other flat land that they probably could do a better job with. So if we're going to have low density land anywhere in Harnett County, then it needs to be land that has a very complex topography, that has streams, has wildlife and nature and all that stuff before we destroy it. I don't have any experience being on a planning committee. I don't have any experience being on a board of commissioners. I was never mayor of Angier. But I have to believe that we're all looking for responsible growth, and we all want the wisdom to make a really good decision tonight. I also have to believe it's much easier to go from low density to high density than to 10 years later decide we made a mistake and try to go from high density to low density. Once these wetlands are gone, we can't put them back. The last comment I'll make is I never got notice that this was even happening. And I know that's surprising. So in Neels Creek, most of the residents in Neels Creek don't even know that this is going in because they notified the people whose lots were adjoining to that subdivision, but not the people who have deeded access to it. So everyone in Neels Creek subdivision has the ability to use those trails. None of those people are ever notified about this. So you're seeing a small representation of people from Neels Creek that heard maybe word of mouth from the owners that actually got the postcard in the mail. I'm glad that I found out. Again, I made my home here 10 years ago, stationed at Fort Bragg. When I come home, it's such a rural area that I'm not in a rush to see that ruined. And so I would ask you, please consider postponing this. Again, I'm not anti-development, anti-growth. I know it's going to happen. I just want it to be responsible growth. And we can always move forward, and we can always go to medium density. We can always build more houses. We can always build more roads. But if you think about that Bojangles, you can't hardly get in that drive-through as it is. And I didn't even think about the schools and how overcrowded they are. And with all the families that are moving into Weatherspoon that you've already approved, we haven't seen the impact of that and where those kids are going to go. It's just going to cost the county more money in services, more money in roads. You guys will have to pay. Thank you.
Thanks, sir. Anyone else?
Again, my name is Kayla Horton. Do you need my address again or anything? 18 Boulder Drive, Sanford 27332. I've lived here for about 11 years. I've been a real estate broker in the area for over 11 years since I've been here. And one thing that I would recommend, Commissioner McCoy made the comment that, you know, people are going to spend their lifetimes in these houses and pass them down to their family. If you've toured a lot of these new construction homes, you will know right away that they're not going to be passed on from generation to generation because they're not going to last that long. I would recommend to the commissioners to go tour some of these developers' homes that they've already built in other areas and see if they can put their money where their mouth is on the quality of what they're building in our county. And, you know, I think that would be a good idea and a good place to start when they sit here and talk about the quality of their homes. Because I've been in a lot of them, and I can't speak for this developer, but they're not super great. So I just wanted to put that 2 cents in.
Thank you.
I'm Claire Cooper, and I live at 226 Hartman Drive in Andrew. A lot of people have already said a lot of things that I would agree with. I'm going to try to make mine very brief. The developers are going to make a very good profit without changing to medium density. They're going to make a good profit at low density or they wouldn't develop. It makes good business sense to try to maximize your profits. But I've had a lot of questions about this. Are any of these profits going to be spent in Harnett County? Would the developers choose to live in the developments next door or the development that they're planning to put on this property? Couldn't they also do these extra protections for the environment, conservation, whatever is going to be maximally helpful without changing to medium density? Couldn't they do that at low density? Does Harnett County really need more medium density land right now? Do we have a housing shortage in the county? And if so, is it a shortage of the kinds of houses at the probable price range of the houses that will be in this development? And a lot of the other things a lot of people have said are interesting, but it seems to me, and I agree with them, the reasons for their weak application are pretty clear. And I read this application multiple times and tried to dissect it. It's very weak. The only reason it says that it maintains health, safety, and general welfare is because they will have access to public water and sewer. Well, that means they won't have to have septic tanks or wells, but I think there's a lot more to that question than just the septic tank or wells. There's nothing wrong with intelligent development, and there's nothing wrong with maximizing profits. I mean, that's how business grows. It seems to me the question that we're raising tonight as homeowners is maximizing the profits of another limited liability corporation more important than the quality of life for people in Harnett County?
Anyone else? Seeing no one move to come forward, we'll close the public hearing. And commissioners, if you have questions or comments, this is the time for you to ask those questions. How many units are you planning? Or have you gotten that far in your?
We're still looking at various layouts and concepts. So roughly speaking, it'll probably be 120 units on the 90 acres. So that gives you a density of, I don't know, 1.4 units per acre. But again, we're still in the conceptual phase and trying to determine what's the best site layout. But there are some givens. We do have to connect to the Atherstone subdivision for the connectivity purposes, traffic purposes.
Thanks, sir. It was brought up about the cemetery. Do we have provisions to preserve cemeteries?
Yeah, the state requires that you have to treat. They have standards for how you treat cemeteries when you're in developments and things like that. I think I don't want to speak specifics to it because I don't want to be inaccurate and tell the board something. But there are standards in place for when cemeteries where they require them to be preserved, and I think there could be even a method to where they can move them to a different place. But I think most folks just kind of preserve them in place.
We would propose any cemeteries that are discovered, it's going to be part of our open space. We always preserve those. We do not disturb those that
What about the original site of Neal's Creek Church? Do you know where that is?
I do not. I do not know the history of that, where the church was. We have surveyed the site, and we've had an environmental company go out and look. It's called a Phase 1 site assessment report. They have reportedly have been told there's a cemetery out there. It has not been identified yet. So generally, if it is identified in the process of development, it stops everything. We have to notify the state, and then we usually if it's in a lot or something, that lot becomes an open space lot. And I believe you have to put a fencing barrier around it as well. Mm-hmm. So.
How is this, what's the current zoning of this property?
R30.
R30?
Yes, sir.
And it's low density, right?
It's currently the low density aspect of this thing comes, and I tried to explain it earlier, and maybe I didn't do a really good job because I've been listening to the comments, and they've all been great comments, absolutely great comments, and things that the board should certainly take in consideration. When it comes to us as a planning department, we prefer a compatibility or conservation style subdivision, which is why when it becomes medium density residential, it's an offset. It gives more lots to the developer, but we're hoping that in return that they do a better development. We're hoping for those sidewalks. We want the curb and gutter. We want the street trees, and we want the wider streets. So I don't know if I explained that really well in the beginning. If this developer goes away, another one comes, yeah, they would have the same access to give us those same benefits right back. Or they could develop it as it sits. You can leave it as it is tonight, and they can develop it as a standard subdivision. Standard subdivision does not require sidewalks, does not require street trees, does not require curb and gutter, open ditches, and so it's an offset, you know. And then there's also other offsets. Everything that these folks brought up tonight, traffic, school overcrowding, and all those other things that come into play. So you have to kind of look at everything and make a decision. But I just want everyone in the room to understand where we're coming from as a planning department. We prefer to see that type of development versus the standard straight subdivision. We believe that it is quality, better development for the county.
Thank you, Mr. Locklear. Anything else? Anyone else got any questions?
I just want to clarify, they can still do that, correct, under low density? I mean, he was speaking in regards to the quality that...
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they could still do that. It's a little bit more of a carrot for them if it's medium density residential to maybe go that route. But yeah, they could utilize that. They're not going to get as many lots, but yeah, they could still go that route. So
I do have a question that I had asked. How long has this entity owned the property?
Put under contract in December, and I believe that it closed in March. We went in and then it was transferred into one of our holding companies that just holds on to the property until it changes hands.
Do you have any other developments inside the county?
We do.
Where at?
We have one on, off of Highway 42. We have a 19-lot development there, and we also own property in the Perry Creek.
Spring Lake area.
Spring Lake area, excuse me.
Any other questions for these gentlemen? Do I hear a motion concerning this matter?
I make a motion that we deny this request to, not rezoning, but update the land use map from low to medium density.
Johnson seconds that motion.
Okay, you second that? We have a motion and, pardon? We have a motion and second. All in favor of denying this permit, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Motion, this change in land use map is denied.